in anti-Semitic incidents in 2024. Let's tell you that the GTI is produced by international think tank, the Institute for Economics and Peace, and has been published annually for the last 12 years. It is regarded as the most comprehensive resource on global terrorism trends. However, the military has expressed doubt over Nigeria's ranking in the Global Terrorism Index reports. Let's hear from Director of Defense Media Operations, Major General Marcus Kaye.
This news conference presents the Nigerian military authorities with an opportunity to give updates on operations across the country.
From 29 February to 4th March, following credible report on activities of violent extremists, road forces responded and made contact with East and Uku, as well as Mapoji local government areas of Benue State, and Karimlando Lab, Taku, our current local government areas of Taraba State. During the operations, 3 extremists were neutralized, 7 kidnappers, criminals were arrested, while 3 kidnapped hostages were also rescued. 2 AK-47 rifles, 1 local-made rifle, 61 rounds of 7.62mm special ammunition, and 1 magazine were recovered from them.
But he has an axe to grind with the latest Global Terrorism Index, which ranks Nigeria 6th among countries most affected by terrorism. General Kiange is concerned that the ranking doesn't reflect the current effort in combating terrorism in the country.
I'm not countering what they put out there, but as observers on the scene, I believe we should be the better person that will give the correct version of what is happening in Nigeria.
While the report fails to acknowledge that Nigeria is winning the war against terrorism, it highlights that deaths in sub-Saharan Africa are now at their lowest since 2016. Sifon Asian, TVC News, Abuja.
These are worrisome revelations, everyone. But for more on this, let's speak with Group Captain Sadiq Garba, retired security consultant, CEO Conflict Security and Development Consults Limited. Group Captain, good evening. Welcome to Politics Tonight. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. You know, the first question anyone would ask from this part of the world is, what does this mean for Nigeria and Africa? But before we get there, this year's Global Terrorism Index highlights 2 key concerns. Firstly, 98% of all terrorist deaths occurred in conflict zones, with 2024 recording the highest number of conflicts since the end of World War II. What's your evaluation of these numbers? How is the Global Terrorism Index compiled and by who? And does it really give us a clear perspective of the state of terrorism globally?
Thank you very much. Yes, it is very important first to understand how the Global Terrorism Index is compiled. As you said in your preview, the Global Terrorism Index started to be collected in 2012. It is, compiled by the International Institute for Economics and Peace. And it is an Australian-based organization owned by an Australian by the name of Stephen Kilelia. Now, how does it do this thing? Every year from that 2012, the Global Terrorism Index collects 163 countries across the world. In all, they are always aiming to cover about 90 to 97% of the world population. So they go as wide as possible. The countries taken every year might change, but then in picking the countries, certainly countries that are afflicted by terrorism, they will get priority. But they also put countries that have even zero, terrorism index so that they can do comparison. So when they take these 103 countries, what they do is that they rate them and score them based on the impact of terrorism that happened in that country for the prevailing year. Now, when we're talking about the 2025 report, which came out last week, that means it is covering the period of January to December 2024. Now, when it takes these countries, it rates them on 4 different indices. Each of these indices has specific weighted points. What are the indices? First, what is the number of terrorist incidents that were reported in a particular country? That is the first index. The second index is how many deaths were recorded directly as a result of the terrorist attacks. The third index is injuries. How many people were injured directly as a result of the terrorist attacks, and then finally, what are the property losses that were incurred as a result of the terrorist index, all covering the previous year. Now, having said that, when you look at the four indices, and naturally so, the one that carries the most weight is number of lives lost. Number of deaths has higher weight than number of injuries, the number of attacks, the number of this. So when they compile these things, each country is given a score between 0 and 10. 0 means a country that had no terrorist incident at all during the year. Then 10. So this is how the countries are rated. That means the higher your point, it means the worse for you, or the more impacted you are, in this thing. In Nigeria, we started having terrorism. We can see whether we see 2010, 2011, but the GTI started being collected in 2012. Now, since it started being collected, Nigeria's position has been vacillating. I can even say we can even say now we are having better figures, because we are having figures ranging. Sometimes we score the second, sometimes the third, sometimes the fifth, sometimes the sixth, sometimes the eighth, and then the sixth we're having this year. So generally, the worst ranking we got was 2. That was around the years 2015, 16, 17. Then the best ranking we got was the one of 8, which we got last year. So when you look at it, it's within that perspective, you have to look at our ranking of 6th now.
All right, good, Captain. So is it reliable, and has it been challenged by other countries?
Every rating, it is bound to be challenged. Naturally, some countries feel, when they are not rated in the way they feel, there will be challenges. The GTI, we must say, is widely respected, but it is not a perfect thing. For example, it is not as if the GTI will place people in the country, in every country to record these things. What do? They rely on available information that is publicly available. So, of course, again, when we say publicly available information, this is from media. Different media have their different ownerships, have their different distance. So there is the potential. I'm not saying it happened here, but when you are relying on open media, it depends on this media. There's potential for either under-reporting or over-reporting, especially in countries where the media is not free. So that is one of the issues. Again, one of the limitations of the GTI, just like I had General Kange, he said it does not take the actual realities of the ground. I mean, what is happening currently on the ground. Again, that is another criticism of the GTI. Again, like I said, when you say 2025 report, you are talking about what happened from January 2024 to December 2024. Absolutely. So all the figures that General Kange was reeling out on the recent successes, definitely they are not captured in that report. And that is actually one of the, not only Nigeria, I've read where countries like Pakistan, India, China, Afghanistan, they have all sometimes made these complaints when their rating is not, is not good enough. They have complained that the weight does not carry what is happening on the ground. So it's good also to understand that. When we say 2025, we're talking of past event. What is happening now from January up to now, up to December, will come out in the 2026 report. Now, what other something can we say about the Global Terrorism Index? Again, it is backward looking. That means it's not looking at current. And another thing we have to understand, it is a quantitative work. Okay. It is only concerned with numbers. Sometimes, again, that's another criticism that is made of the GTI. What do I mean? The GTI is only interested, like I said, in number of attacks, in people that died. For example, the GTI will not capture some counter-terrorism efforts that are done. For example, if the military is able to discover an attack before it takes place and nip it in the mud, that is not likely to come out. Of course, the military will count it as a success, and it is a success, but that will not come out in the GTI report. If Boko Haram or any terrorist surrenders, that is, an achievement for the military, but it will not come out in the GTI report. If there are some, terrorism financiers, they were arrested, or a terrorist hideout, or a logistic base is crushed, that will not come out in the report. So again, this is the issue. When you are looking, it is a very good tool, but you have to put at the back of mind that it is quantitative rather than qualitative.
Absolutely.
So in interpreting the GTI, you also have to do some qualitative analysis.
Absolutely.
Again,
and I find that very
other countries, not only
interesting,
Nigeria,
Group Captain.
But having said all that,
okay,
there are about 7 or 8 rating agencies that rate these terrorism issues in the world. And to be honest, the GTI is among the top. The problem we find that if you are conversant with using this, there is no index that will cover all the activities. So sometimes an index will choose areas where it wants to. So for the GTI, it concentrates of quantitative analysis. It is a very good tool for quantitative, and it is highly rated, highly edition. But then I give you that there are such complaints from countries, just like we're seeing from Nigeria. But the most important thing to understand is that it is backward looking. If you are talking of operations that Nigeria military did like last week, this week, certainly they are not going to be captured in this report, and they will be captured.
All right. Thank you for highlighting that, Group Captain, because I was going to ask if there are other terrorism indexes apart from GTI, and if any, how do they compare with GTI? But let's get to the nitty-gritty of this report. This particular report points out the 4 deadliest terrorist groups in the world. It says intensified their violence in 2024, driving an 11% rise in fatalities, with 45 countries deteriorating and 34 improving. Does this truly reverse nearly a decade of improvement?
I lost you because my earpiece went up. If you could retake, please. So
I was going to ask if there were other terrorism indexes apart from GTI, and if there are, how do we compare this with them with GTI? But I want us to get to the nitty-gritty of the report, which points out the 4 deadliest terrorist groups intensified their violence in 2024, driving an 11% increase in fatalities, with 45 countries deteriorating and 34 improving. So I asked, does this truly reverse nearly a decade of improvements? Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you very much for staying with us. Group Captain Sadiq Garba, retired senior consultant, CEO Conflict Security and Development Consults Limited, is my guest tonight as we analyze 2025 Global Terrorism Index in focus. Group Captain, thank you very much for staying with us on the program. So I wanted us to focus on the key findings of this report, which pointed out that the 4 deadliest terrorist groups intensified their violence in 2024, driving an 11% rise in fatalities, with 45 countries deteriorating and 34 improving. So does this truly reverse nearly a decade of improvement? Should we take GTI serious?
When you read the report of the GTI, honestly, it's a very detailed report. You will see that for every country that they analyzed, they give specific dates, specific attacks, what happened, where, and also it is very easy for an independent researcher like myself or any other interested person to even go and say, okay, they said this thing happened at this particular time, at this particular date. And when you check the media, you'll find it. So I think the year is, like most years, it's a checkered year. There are some good things, there are some bad things. Like for us in Africa or in the Sahel region or West Africa, it is really a bad year, because when you look at the countries that are rated from 1st to 10, about 6 of them are African countries. Within Africa, 5 of them are out from the Sahel area. The Sahel is carrying about 51% of all deaths and incidents. You also have 4 countries that are in West Africa, and you have 3 countries that are in LCB. Now, when you look at a country, we are part of the Lake Chad Basin region, which is affected. We are part of West Africa. Some parts of Nigeria is also part of the Sahel. So definitely it is a very frightening picture for us. But at the same time, I said it is a picture that is mixed. On the one hand, when we look at Nigeria, for example, we have a very big drop in the number of incidents, which is about a 37%, from the last report, this one. We had a reduction from 144 attacks to 99, which is a very good reduction of 37%. But on the other hand, again, what pushed our ranking is the increase in number of deaths. Because again, like I said, out of the indices I enumerated, number of deaths, and that is naturally so because we are talking about lives, that carries more weight. So it is a variegated picture, but at the same time, I think it is not that, like I see the screaming headlines, Nigeria has moved 6th from 8. Yes, that is a fact. But then the details need to be studied. The fact that we're having the lowest number of attacks since 2011 or since 2012 that the GTI started, I think for me it is a very good indication. However, that is not to say that we are yet out of the woods, because if some countries are having 0 or they are having less than us and we are still in the first 10 that are impacted, it means we still have a lot more to do. Right. But the fact that we've been able to push Boko Haram and ISWAP attacks to only 99 from 144 during the last report, it means the security forces or generally the government is doing something right. And that's what we should keep doing.
Absolutely. You know, Group Captain would focus on Africa and Nigeria in a moment. But quickly, let's talk about this shift towards online radicalization and how it has enabled potential terrorists to access extremist content. We saw the same script played out last year here in Nigeria, where some bandits were on TikTok doing what they call giveaways to young Nigerians. What danger does this pose to what it looks like the majority of Western attacks are now carried out by individuals without formal groups' affiliations?
Sorry, please, I didn't catch your question about TikTok. I didn't get it.
I wanted us to focus on this shift towards online radicalization and how it has... Can you hear me, Group Captain?
I can hear you now.
Right.
I can hear you.
The shift towards online radicalization and how it has enabled potential terrorists to access extremist content. And I said we saw the same script played out last year here in Nigeria, where some bandits were seen on TikTok doing what they call giveaways to young Nigeria, just to lure them. What danger does this pose to the world at large? And because this report identifies that the majority of Western attacks are now carried out by individuals without formal groups' affiliations who radicalize through social media.
Yes, certainly the social media, especially with the younger generation who spend a lot of hours on them, has been recognized by terrorists as an area where they can do some recruitment. If they cannot do physical recruitment, they can recruit people virtually. So the challenge is very big for the security agencies, especially the intelligence agencies and the communications authorities, to make sure that our internet, our WhatsApp, and everything is being oversighted. However, the danger of too much oversight again is that it is potential to misuse. But it is a very strong way that terrorists get radicalized. Some have never been to any country, but from their home they can be radicalized through posts, through media, through mails that they are receiving, and before you know it, they are leaving to go and join the... We have seen this happening a lot in the Western countries. Yes. But Nigeria is not an island on itself, unless something is done. But in taking, efforts about media, prescription or media oversight, there has to be a balance to be struck between human rights and also the rights of the citizen to communicate and then protecting national interests. If care is not taken, there is tendency, on the one hand, you could go wrong on both ways. You could allow everything to go on, which is dangerous. On the other hand, again, you could go to, like a kind of closed society where people are not free, again, which will infringe on people's human rights. So it is a delicate balance, and it is something of, how would I say, work ethics of the security and the communication agencies. Work ethics demands that you do not use your personal grouse with somebody to pounce on him. You completely, look at national interests and where security interests are threatened. Because in most cases, again, while we see this thing, sometimes everything can be done under the cover of our national security. That is on the one hand. So it is a very dangerous times we are in. But then the kind of measures will be taken have to be measures that are well, balanced between people's rights and the right for the security of other citizens.
You may have to help us with the measures, but that will be in a moment. I mean, it's worrisome to see that 5 of the 10 countries most impacted by terrorism are in the Sahel. Terrorism in the Sahel, according to this report, has increased significantly, which you have also highlighted before now. And to be specific, it says the Sahel accounts for 51% of 2024's terrorism deaths. And I mean, let's not forget that in 2007, this figure was reportedly 1%. What must have gone wrong?
Well, if you look at the Sahel countries, now the Sahel is a very wide region. Sometimes it's even very difficult to describe. Some people, when they talk of the Sahel, they think Nigeria is not there. The northern fringes of Nigeria, Adamawa, Borno, Yobe, Sokoto, all those areas are part of the Sahel. And the Sahel covers over 10 other countries. Some countries like Nigeria are not fully in the Sahel, but parts of the country are there. So it is a very wide expanse. And if you look at the Sahel countries that are listed at the top 10, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, and to some extent Cameroon, some of these countries, you know, they are very, very big countries, like Niger, for example. It is a very big country, and with the shifting of geopolitical alliances in this region, we've had the expulsion of the French, the expulsion of the Americans, the coming in of the Russians and the Chinese. All these issues, you know, there is tendency that geopolitical wars might move into these regions. So it is a very, you know, a very alarming situation.
Group Captain, aren't these external influences, but local influence now, is this as a result of weak governance, ethnic tensions, or what would you say has created this conducive environment in which terrorism can flourish?
I completely agree with you. At the bottom of everything, you'll find bad governance. Because in the first place, if we are even looking for allies to come in and settle bases and, you know, take care of your security, it's because of bad governance. It's bad governance that also encourages people to join all these radical groups or extremist groups. It is bad governance that deprives them of education. It is bad governance that, you know, deprives them of all social amenities, education, health, and the rest, which when the terrorist comes and offers something in place, kind of replacing the government, he will get adherents. So definitely, I agree with you, and I always, you know, emphasize that the internal or the domestic content that is fueling terrorism is far, far more than the external content. I always say that, and I am one of those analysts that I always frown at always trying to throw the problem outside rather than looking inside. I think the problem is more homegrown than external. Bad governance is what is at the root cause of this extremism and news that are joining these radical groups.
All right, back to the report, Group Captain. JNMI or JNIM is the dominant group in the Sahel. It's on the decline. First, is this progress? Should we be more worried than ever? 4 countries from the West African region are in top 10. What does this say about regional stability?
Well, regional stability is threatened because, like you see again, when you look at the top 10 countries, you see Africa, you see West Africa, you see Lake Chad Basin region, you see these are the countries that are mired in this, you know, problem of terrorism. And at the same time, instead of having a concerted effort, the problem is made, you know, more complex by the fact we are having some geopolitical realignments. Geopolitical realignment with some countries, for example, going out of ECOWAS, which makes the work more difficult because terrorism by nature is an international phenomenon. It is a long accepted dictum that no country can fight terrorism on its own. So where you have a concerted effort, where you have regional groupings that are working together politically, economically, security-wise, certainly fighting terrorism is going to be difficult. Now we have a problem where the Sahel or the West Africa or the Lake Chad Basin region is the most, you know, impacted in terms of terrorism. And at the same time, this is why you are having big geopolitical realignments with companies breaking loose from regional organizations, which certainly are the building blocks. Whether help is going to come from inside or from outside, these regional blocks, they serve as a forum that, you know, concerted effort can be taken. So we are really in a very dicey situation. And in that respect, I think this 2025 GTI report is a wake-up call for all leaders of Africa, especially in West Africa, in the Lake Chad Basin region, in the Sahel region, to understand that despite their geopolitical differences they may be having, when it comes to terrorism, if they don't come together to fight this phenomenon, every country will be at the losing end. And for Nigeria, I will continue to call on the government to do everything possible to ensure that we have some cordial relationship with our neighbors. Because to be honest, what happens in your neighborhood, as far as terrorism is concerned, is likely to affect you. So no effort should be spared. No money is a waste when it comes to mending faces with our this. Geopolitics is something that countries have their sovereignty, whether, for example, to be in a certain alliance or not. It's a sovereign right for every country to take. But at the same time, it should be viewed differently when we're talking about security. I'm happy just before I came to this interview, I learned that the Nigerian ambassador in Nigeria was holding a meeting, whether yesterday or today, with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Niger, We've not had this kind of meetings. The Chief of Defense Staff, General Gwabin, has been doing some forays going to these countries to show that military men have to talk about security even if there is political differences between their masters. In any case, the bottom line is that the Sahel region, the West African region, the Lake Chad Basin region has to have a concerted effort. You will understand we have so many working this, like the MNJTF. You have many countries there. Now, when one country decides not to take part, there is going to be a huge gap, and the work is going to be much, much more difficult. It is already difficult as it is,
absolutely.
But not having regional blocks is going to make it even more difficult.
And talking about meetings and the impact of these meetings on the region, the military chiefs met in Abuja to fine-tune modalities for activating the proposed ECOWAS standby force. Taking into cognizance the complexity of the security landscape, how do we address the root causes of insecurity in the West African sub-region?
Well, again, we come back to the earlier question you asked. The root causes of insecurity lie in poor governance. They lie in poor governance. So, like I said, whenever you look, even if you bring some external actors or some external factors, like we hear, in my own opinion, those external factors cannot act for more than 10, maximum 20% of the problems of terrorism in the whole of these countries. The problem is homegrown. The problem is for the countries, to put their money, to put their money where their mouth is. If you talk about even some external influences, by managing your resources, by managing your citizens, I am sure you can attack the root causes of terrorism, which are lack of education, lack of social amenities, lack of inclusion in government. These are the root causes, and I think only a concerted effort by the governments of each country, each bringing its way, that is what is going to solve the problem of insecurity for us.
All right, but this news about the TTP, Pakistani Taliban, which has now become the fastest growing terrorist organization in the world. Are world leaders paying attention to this, and how do we ensure it does not spread to Africa?
Well, one way of preventing, because terrorism also can, in fact, it crosses borders, either between countries, either between the terrorist groups. They can exchange information, they can exchange tactics. Some years back, the terrorists in Nigeria, they were not conversant with how to manufacture IEDs. This was given to them by ISIS. So these are issues, again, that have to do with tighter border controls. Tighter border controls. Again, I hear Niger and Nigeria talking about that. Tighter controls, also clamping down on terrorism financing. There is no terrorism that can survive without financing. But I think, this is my personal opinion, up to now, we've not been able to actually identify, in the case of Nigeria, where this financing is coming. Yes. So it is still a challenge for our intelligence services, whether the military intelligence, whether the civil intelligence, it is still a challenge 15 years down the line to identify where the finances of this terrorist is coming. We have, this is again my opinion, what we have are only, theories, but we have not been able to get concrete proofs as to where this money is coming. And I think that is the big challenge, because if you can cut off the money, you have cut off the logistics. If you cut off the logistics, you have cut off the terrorists. So this is an effort that we have to do, because if we don't do that, again, terrorists have a way of migrating. What is happening in Iraq or Iran or Syria, they may come and form alliance with the terrorist groups.
Captain, is it really a challenge? Is it really a challenge, or the political will to identify these financiers?
Well, it depends on what you hear. Again, even in Nigeria, sometimes we have been making some conflicting statements. With due respect, we are talking frankly here, where a government will say at one time that I have terrorists in my government and then nothing is done, where a government will announce that we have identified terrorist financiers and then everything will go silent, there is no prosecution. So you wonder where the problem is. In fact, the latest allegation, which is on now, is that there's even terrorism financing coming from America through the United States Agency for International Development. Now, with all this, if you have all these allegations, the problem is any of these allegations will come up and fill the news media, but after a while it will come down. So nobody comes out to say that we have investigated this and what we found. We have taken these people to court. So the problem actually is still with us. Nigeria is a sovereign country. if any country, this is my own opinion, is having a hand in the terrorism financing in Nigeria, and Nigeria has concrete proofs, Nigeria is not powerless to take efforts to checkmate that country. So I think we should not be crying and just wringing our arms that as if we are powerless. We are not powerless. So maybe we have to talk, maybe it is the political will that is not there to deal with this thing. Again, I still stand on the fact that till now, 15 years since we started Boko Haram, we've not been able to fully identify where is their funding coming, if at all there is any external funding that is coming to them.
That was quite instructive. And I wonder what you make of this call by the ECOWAS Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, Abdel Fattah Musa, who is advocating for a counterterrorism brigade that will serve as a deterrent to the southern drift of terrorism in the region. What do you make of this, and what are your expectations?
The problem, again, with African leaders in general, and not Africa, because I have worked with the African Union, where we've had some operations that needed to be solved, like in Central African Republic, like in Mali, I participated in that operations. What we find when African leaders are talking about African solutions to African problems, you know, it arises, and it is going to be worse. It is going to be worse with somebody like Trump in power now. Because what Trump is for now is that he is not going to waste, in quotation, he's not going to, America is not going to be wasting money on countries that they believe do not offer them anything. But what do we find? We have several meetings calling for African Standby Force, calling for ECOWAS Standby Brigade, East African Standby Brigade. We have been doing this for more than 20 years. But the truth is that none of these brigades actually exists. When you say a standby brigade, it's like a standby fire tender, which is already there, serviced, fueled, with the driver, with the firefighters there. Once there's fire, you move. That is the idea when the African peace and security architecture was evolved more than 20 years now. But unfortunately, whenever we have a problem in Africa, we find that there is no standby brigade that is standing by. We find that there is no money to mobilize. We find that countries that are supposed to contribute troops, either one country will say, I don't have troops, I don't have money to transport my this thing, and we start waiting for outside African help. I was in the African Union, for example, when the Mali situation started. There was a plan that there was going to be an African, peace support operation. But for many months, it was meeting after meeting, but nobody was given a kobo. That force was not able to deploy until the European Union released some 50 million euros. That's when, and even then, it became a fight between African Union and ECOWAS, who is going to control the funds. So this is the issue. This standby brigade, we have not even, so to talk of even another standby counterterrorism, we have not even gotten the basics. Well, I wish ECOWAS, and I wish what Dr. Abdel Fattah said is going to fruition. But from the past, what we have been seeing is that African countries are not ready to finance the security of the continent. And unless that changes, every country has to pay its service. There are countries that are doing more than their fair share of carrying the weight, but most of the countries, a recent report said, for example, like about, I think close to more than 30% of African Union members, they are not paying their dues. How are you going to have a standby brigade? You are not going to have it. So, but I hope, again, like I said, this 2025 ranking, and the fact, sometimes people say that the coming of Trump might even be a kind of blessing in disguise. Because this is a man who is saying, I am not going to be given the money that America is going. Yeah. So maybe that's another way to look at it. Maybe this will force African leaders now to realize that they have to solve their problem with their own, with their own hands.
So, Group Captain, let's just imagine that there is some level of seriousness this time. What security framework and regional standby measures would guarantee the successful implementation of this initiative?
Well, again, like I said, it is at the bottom line, you still come back to the issue of finance. When you do a meeting in Abuja or in Addis Ababa or wherever it is, and you say you are setting up a brigade, and then no country is ready to finance its troops to go to where the brigade is supposed to assemble. No country is supposed to keep those troops ready. Because a standby, like I want to understand, a standby is not country A having its forces in its house waiting, country B having, no. A standby, they are supposed to be a headquarters. A location has been selected, wherever it is, where these troops will be there. They are going to be there on standby. Like you normally see when you go to some of these advanced countries. Even a fire brigade, if you see a fire brigade, when you are on duty on fire brigade, you are expecting fire 24 hours. So the people are there. It's not that Oga is not around, let's call him. Or this. No, everybody is there waiting to move. So definitely the only panacea is to go back to that African standby force architecture, under which every sub-region is supposed to have a brigade that is fully deployed in terms of resources, in terms of material, are dedicated to that brigade, waiting for something to happen, then they can intervene. Unless we have that, there is going to be a round of talk, but no action on the ground, unfortunately.
Sadly. All right, let's bring this conversation back home. Group Captain, we were ranked second in 2015. This time we're sixth, still within top 10. I mean, one would say, is there anything to be happy about? But like the Army has said, this does not reflect the level of progress the nation has made in its fight against insecurity. Is this the military living in self-denial or a wake-up call for the government to do more in fighting jihadist groups?
I differ with some people on analyzing, after reading thoroughly this Global Terrorism Index, that is one, and also after knowing how it works. To me, I think the Nigerian military or the Nigerian government has a lot to celebrate concerning this Global Terrorism Index 2025, but also they have a lot to take as a caution. What do I mean? Where we lost the rating out of this indices is in the issue of number of people that lost their lives over the 2024 period. And like I said, that is one index that carries a lot of weight. We had 500 and, an increase of about 37%. That is what dragged us. Yes, I have the figures here. In 2024, we had 524 people that died. Then in 2023, then in this latest report, we have 565. That means an increase of 7.26. And like I told you, number of deaths, it was carried the most weight out of all the other four indices. And again, I want our listeners to understand, when GTI says number of deaths, they are counting, is like we say in Nigerian parlance, all die na die. That is today, they are counting the deaths of everybody. Even if our troops die as a result of the counterterrorism effort, is going to be counted. If Boko Haram themselves die, is going to be counted. If some farmers or some locals who are killed, is going to be counted. So these deaths, as far as GTI is concerned, as far as people are dying as a result of terrorism efforts, it counts. So this is why we lost a lot of mark. And then in the number of incidents, instead of 89 that we had in the previous year, we had 177. Which this one is about twofold where we lost. But the good point is in the number of incidents. Instead of 144 that we had a decrease. The number coming to 99. And it is a fact, like Punch newspaper said, I also checked. Since 2012, this number of 99 incidents is the lowest number of terrorist attacks that Nigeria has recorded for a particular year since Boko Haram started. So I think we should be looking at the positive side, what at the same part, not mindful of the listen. And again, I still come back to the number of deaths. What caused our number of deaths? If there is an attack, and I mean, it is not fatal that people are not killed. It carries a lighter weight. But when there's an attack, like for example, again, we're unfortunate in that 2024, Boko Haram were able to carry out one dastardly attack that was that was a high mass casualty attack, if I can call it. This was the attack that happened on the 1st of September 2024, where in a single attack in a village called Termua in Mafa village, in Termua local government of Yobe State, Boko Haram found harmless farmers and killed 100 to 150. This is one of the aspects that affected our ranking.
Group Captain, because of time, what are your recommendations for AFN and the federal government?
Now, my recommendation first to the military, which is my constituency or my former destination, I call on them not to look at this report, to take this report seriously. And also to look, they should examine it very well. In fact, the military should commission a committee to really look at this report. What did it say? It is not all bad news. The fact that they have been able to suppress Boko Haram to carry out only 99 is a very big plus, which is the smallest number that has been recorded since we started Boko Haram insurgency. Whatever they are doing, they must be doing something good that made Boko Haram not to be able to launch many attacks, and they should be continuing that. On the aspect of, the number of casualties, it means they should provide more security to villagers, because that is where Boko Haram will hit, and in subsequent reports, that will also be the same. That is for the military on its own. And for the federal government, like I said, terrorism, yes, we have to mend fences with our neighbors, whatever it takes. Because definitely, if we don't have peaceful neighbors or cordial neighbors, it's going to affect our counterterrorism efforts. All
right, then. That's a good place to leave this conversation. Thank you so much, Group Captain Sadiq Garba. Thank you so much for your input, and we appreciate it always. Thank you so much. Please have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you very much for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But before we go, let's tell you that the views and reactions of our resource persons are theirs and have no connection with TVC News. Meanwhile, you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at midnight. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X. That's TVC News NG and at Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I'm Olajumoke.